So Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana delivered his budget vote in Parliament yesterday. Godongwana used the occasion to sound the alarm on the rising budget deficit, but he's emphasized government's commitment to reduce debt to save South Africa more than 380 billion rand a year in interest on repayments. For more analysis on this, let's now speak to policy expert from the University of Johannesburg, Professor Daniel Meyer. Professor Meyer, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. So during the budget speech in February, we already knew that we are facing quite a some bleak prospects, but listening into what the minister had to say when it comes to the budget deficit, do you think that he has been able to calm the markets when it comes to how South Africa is able to deal with the budget deficit?
Good morning and thank you. The Minister of Finance has been doing a very good job since he was appointed a few years back. Under very difficult circumstances, he has stabilized the situation in terms of the government debt. We are running between 72 to 75% percentage of GDP in terms of government debt, but he has definitely stabilized the situation. He hasn't reduced it much, but he's done everything he could to stabilize it under very difficult circumstances. For example, the income of government is declining while the expenses has been rising. We've seen state-owned enterprises demanding more bailouts during his period as Minister of Finance. He has done very well to calm the markets. We can see currently the markets are very stable. The JSE is at the highest point ever. I think it's at the highest point now. The rand-dollar exchange rate very stable. So all of the main economic indicators are stable. The one problem is still our growth, our economic growth situation. And that will be an integrated process how to get the country growing again. But as soon as we can have some GDP growth above the 2 to 3%, you will see the GDP to debt ratio dropping relatively fast. So I think he's done a very good job so far under difficult circumstances.
And linked to GDP growth will, of course, be employment. We have the highest unemployment rate currently in the country. Even when we went into the elections, we knew how bleak the situation was. And I wonder whether, with the change in the definition of work, the world of work, and how that is changing, does South Africa have the capacity as well as the intuition that is required to deal with that particular aspect, having people who are actually qualified to work in the 21st century where technology is so important?
I think so, definitely. If we compare the way that we calculate our unemployment rates, it's a very strict way that we do it. I would say that we are under counting the number of people that's working. If it was true that we had like 45% unemployment, you would have seen many more people on the streets and not working. So I think we don't count our informal employment well enough. I think the informal employment is a much higher percentage of the employment sector. So I think we have got the capacity to improve a lot on our employment situation, taking into account modern technology, that people can start our businesses much easier online through technology. So there's a very positive outlook for it. It's the government's role to create an enabling environment for people to be successful in the business world. And that is a little bit where government has failed us. The environment is very difficult. In recent surveys for the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor project, that is a global project, our enabling environment for small business to be successful is the worst in the world. So we are really struggling, for example, in terms of infrastructure. If you want to start a business, there's load shedding, although we had now 110 days without it, but it's been a huge problem the last 5 to 7 years. So that is very difficult to start and maintain a good business. And then we've also got issues like safety and security. That's a huge cost for business. So if we can have an improved enabling environment within a very good policy environment, I'm sure that we can turn the ship around within a very much improved growth environment, then we can create jobs.
Yeah.
If we look at, sorry, you can continue?
No, you can go ahead, Prof.
Also looking at graduate unemployment, most graduates, I would say that I've seen a survey, more than 80% of graduates get a job. Maybe not the job they wanted, but there's jobs for them. And a very limited number of graduates are unemployed in South Africa, but they don't always get the job they were looking for or the level of salary they were thinking they will get as their first job, but they can get jobs. The skilled people in South Africa can get jobs. The unskilled is where we need to work hard on to upskill them to be part of the modern economy.
Yeah, and that's the problem, right? Because the Democratic Alliance, for instance, have a different proposal in how you can get those unskilled workers into the workforce. And one of their proposals, for instance, is do away with the minimum wage. And I wonder whether the Government of National Unity would be looking into this and say, perhaps maybe, because the national minimum wage is already legislated, do we say that for the next couple of years, let's not increase the national minimum wage so that you get more and more people being able to afford labor, which will obviously come cheaply?
It could be. You could be right in terms of that, maybe the DA policy. But I would say in general, we need some structural changes in terms of our overall policy for economic development and growth. We cannot continue in the same direction regarding many things. For example, the employment environment. Our employment regulations, labor regulations, are very strict. And we've seen in other countries like Germany, Brazil, and other examples where you've got reduced labor regulations. That will create an environment for job creation. Currently, businesses are very scared to appoint people because you cannot get rid of a person that is not suitable or not working productively in your business. And that can kill a business if you have got people that are in your company, but they are not contributing enough. So there's too many rules and regulations in the labor environment for companies, big, large companies, small ones, to appoint people. They are very, very skeptic to appoint any person in their companies because of all of the labor regulations. The hire and fire situation is not there. There's also very high numbers of temporary temps working for companies because of this reason. And that causes instability in the labor market. If you've got so high percentage of temp workers working in your company, but people are just too scared currently to appoint people on a permanent basis.
Yeah. Which regulation would you then say actually stands in the way of getting more people employed?
I will not. There's like the more than 20 or 30 regulations that's currently running. One of them is this minimum wage. I don't think the minimum wage is the biggest issue. I think it is fair to pay workers a fair salary that they can survive within this increasing cost of living environment. So I don't think the minimum wage is the big problem. I would say that there's many regulations that prevent you to
give us an example,
get rid
Prof.
of a person that is not performing. So I think those ones that is restricting, let's say the hire and the fire related regulations should have a look at, and it will create a more open and free market for appointment of people, still within a fair labor relations market, but make it a little bit less strict.
Yeah.
I've seen examples where huge job creation processes started in other countries when you've got less regulations. Just overall,
sure.
less
I want to
regulations
understand though, Prof, when we say make it easier to hire and fire, what is currently standing in the way of an employer saying that, listen, you have transgressed and therefore here is a disciplinary process that will unfold, and if you are found guilty, which is fair, that your side also be heard, you will be dismissed. How does that hamper employment?
It's quite a costly and time-consuming process, especially if it's a small business, to go through all of those processes. It takes away it's a one-man owned company and like 4 or 5 workers, and 2 of the workers are not performing and producing, but they've been there for more than 3 months, basically making them permanent workers. It distract the company's goal to provide whatever they were producing or services they were doing. So it has got a big impact, especially on smaller companies. And then for that reason, they rather appoint temporary workers on contract basis, like 3 or 6 months contracts, to make it easier for them. And over that time, they can see if the worker is then a good worker or not, and then they can appoint people. So it's just outlook from small businesses that we've seen in the surveys that we've done. They're very scared to appoint people. A process that could be very good is the internship processes for, let's say, graduate students. They come in, they are an intern, they learn, and the company can see if they've got the right skills, the right attitude, the right productivity, and then they could possibly be appointed. But I'm just saying a little bit less restrictions on appointment and also the hire and fire process to make it less processes in it. And it's a little bit too strict in South Africa.
Okay. I guess Labour will disagree with you on that point. But let's move to this issue that the minister raised yesterday in relation to our level of debt. He said that one of the reasons was because of the bailouts that have been received by state-owned entities, 520 billion rand, he says, during the tenure of former President Jacob Zuma. And he says that he is to blame specifically for that. But Jacob Zuma was, of course, at the time, the president of the ANC, the president of the country. Enoch Godongwana was the subcommittee chairperson of the ANC's Economic Transformation Committee. So how then do we ensure that whatever a political party decides on, whoever is at the helm, and whatever decision is being taken is taken with the interest of South Africans being a priority?
Look, it is a fact that in the Zuma years, 2009 up to 2018, roughly, we have seen the state capture project happening. It has been investigated in the Zondo Commission. There's evidence of the things that was done wrong. It has led to many of our state institutions losing their capacity, for example, Eskom. And that has caused the economy huge harm over that decade, or a little bit more than a decade. And it has resulted in government debt rising rapidly because of less income, because of SOE bailouts and many other issues that happened. And we are in the process of turning that around. People that transgressed has not been put to book yet. Hopefully that's going to happen still in the future. But why they have not been arrested or something happened is because of the capacity of our law enforcement agencies that was taken away during that period. So it has been a dark type of more than a decade that happened. But currently everybody is convinced that there's a turnaround. And I think the new government is there to prevent corruption. And I think we need to all support that. I'm busy with some research on the impact of corruption on economic development and growth. And that's a big impact on economic development, including also if we can have improved good governance, improved policy certainty. That will assist a lot going forward and preventing corruption that's happening in the future. We need to turn the ship around in terms of structural change, in terms of policy certainty, in terms of corruption control, good governance. We need best leaders in government and ethical leaders. We cannot have the repeat of that decade that happened. It was really bad, and we have seen the graphs going down in terms of economic growth, in terms of good governance and policy certainty in that period. So it is definitely, it's true that we have been put on the back foot during those years, and it's going to take another decade to fix it by means of good governance and policy certainty.
Thank you so much, Professor Daniel Meyer there, who's a policy expert joining us from the University of Johannesburg.